What's going on, everybody? Jolt here from TheTokenMinorities, and I know I said after my MPL Championship loss that I was going to be taking a break from Mons, but yeah, that didn't happen. And here I am with an off-season draft tournament with the CPC that I decided to join. The CPC stands for the Continental Pokemon Championship, I believe, or conference, something like that. But yeah, I was invited by a couple of the people that joined our March Madness tournaments, and I figured it'd be a pretty cool way for me to get some experience with low-tier Pokemon. As many of you probably don't know, the MPL is shifting to a points system next season as opposed to the open draft that we had been doing in the previous 3 seasons, and that likely will require me to use a few low-tier Pokemon, of which I really don't have much experience with at all, as I'm essentially primarily an OU player. And obviously in my open draft, I rarely drafted anything worse than UU, outside of Wapafit, of course. But, so yeah, as for the general structure of this tournament, it is double elimination, so I have to lose twice to be out, which is pretty nice considering you all know my luck, so hopefully RNG can't screw me out of 2 wins. But, so yeah, it's double elimination, and I believe all the coaches in the tournament are pretty competent. I don't know much about most of them, but I know I saw a few of them compete in the March Madness tournament, and I've heard pretty good things about several of the coaches here as well, so I'm pretty excited to see how I stack up against them, and I do think it's kind of cool to be repping the MPL here outside of the league, and just kind of showing what the MPL is all about in terms of our level of competition. So that's the overview of how all of this is designed, I guess. But as for my first round opponents, I am against John of the Arizona Dactyls. So he's got a pretty interesting team here, but before I go into the details on his team, I'm going to talk about my own team and my draft a little bit, as I think it deserves some mentioning. So the overall format of the draft was that we were allowed to draft anything, or 2 Pokemon from OU, 2 from UU, 2 from RU, 2 from NU, and 2 from PU. So this kind of resembles the same draft style as what the UCL had, except we only have rosters of 10 as opposed to however large the UCL's rosters were. But as for my picks, the first pickup was undoubtedly going to be Clefable if it was around, as I have unfortunately accepted the fact that I'm probably not going to be getting Clefable in the next season of the MPL, as there seems to be a bit of an alliance against me in terms of picking up Clefable before I can for MPL Season 5. So I figured I'd give it one last hurrah here and pick up Clefable in round 1 and then build around Clefable and something else on my team, as I only get 2 OU Pokemon. Those are obviously going to be the centerpieces of my team, and we'll just kind of go from there. So another cool fact here is that this draft tournament is strictly based upon OU rules, meaning certain Pokemon are not banned in this tournament that are banned in the MPL. For example, Mega Metagross is allowed, Mega Latias is allowed, Mega Slowbro is also allowed. Mega Metagross, unfortunately, was picked like number 1 or number 2 overall, and I didn't think it would come to me anyway, as I had like the number 8 or 7 or 9, something like that pick in the draft. But Mega Latias did fall to me, and I know how potent Mega Latios is in the format, and Mega Latias is just an upgrade. So with it being available in my second round, I would be stupid not to pick it up, in my opinion. So I am going to be building around a Clefable Mega Latias core, the dual Combine core, the dual, I guess, I don't know if Mega Latias gets Cosmic Power, but I know it at least gets Stored Power. So at least the dual Stored Power core if I need it. And I think it's a very, very strong core, and I'm excited to see how it works out in this tournament, especially considering there's going to be a lot of low-tier Pokemon that I'm competing against, and with Mega Latias being so bulky, I find it very unlikely that a lot of these low-tier Pokemon are going to be able to even break a substitute, unless it has, like, you know, stab super effective coverage, as Mega Latias is just that bulky. So those are my OU picks. From there, I had my UU selections, and I had, I believe, another middle-of-the-road pick, but Infernape was still available whenever it was my time to make a selection, and given the success that K2 Kyle had in the MPL with Infernape back in the earlier seasons, I thought it was a very good investment here, and I decided to spend my first UU pick on Infernape, as it's a very versatile Pokemon, relatively fast, has access to good priority options in Vacuum Wave and Mach Punch, and is just is so diverse that it's very hard for an opponent to prepare for it outside of using things like Resist Berries. So I thought Infernape was an excellent pick, and I think it's going to support my team very well. For my next UU pick, I picked up Melodic, as that completes a pretty solid defensive core in Clefable, Megalodios, Melodic, and just in general, Melodic as a bulky water is very good with its access to recover and with its deterrence, there's natural deterrence to status ailments given its Marvel scale abilities. So Melodic definitely fits my playstyle pretty well, and I think Clefable supports it very well too, with having Heal Bell and being able to essentially take all the hits that Melodic can't, and Melodic can take essentially all the hits that Clefable can't. So those two together are very strong in my opinion. Plus, I've never actually been able to pick up Melodic in a draft format before, so I'm excited to have the opportunity to use it here. Then moving on to my RU picks, and this is where it gets a little bit more sketchy for me in terms of experience, as like I said, I don't have much experience in low tiers, so I'm just kind of looking through the mons that are available, and I actually had a pretty high RU pick, which is kind of unfortunate. I wish I had a higher like OU pick. Granted, I got good Pokemon regardless, so I'm not complaining, but having a high RU pick isn't as beneficial to me as having like a higher OU or UU pick would have been. But regardless, I decided to go with Hoopa Confined here, as I know Razor of the New York Metangs did decently well with it this past season in the MPL, and I know it has a very high special attack stat, and honestly a respectable attack stat as well, and a good special defense stat too. So I thought overall it had some potential in the format. I know how potent offensive ghost attacks can be, and this does have some good bulk on the special side, so I figured it was a pretty good option here, and also just due to the fact that the dual coverage provided by Stab, Ghost, and Stab Psychic hits almost everything, honestly, and very hard too. So I thought Hoopa was a decent pickup for an RU mon. Obviously, I don't know what the true best Pokemon are in RU. I know that RU has a lot of good fat Pokemon, but I felt I already had a pretty fat core, and I didn't want to waste my first RU pick on something like Alomomola or something like a Moongus or Tangrowth or Slowking. It didn't really make sense to me. Tangrowth definitely was an option I was playing with, but I opted to go with Hoopa here, and I'm excited to see how it works out. The next RU pick I selected was Sneasel, because I have a terrible ghost weakness at this point in the draft, and I need to make sure I can pursuit or at least threaten ghost types with the Sneasel. And obviously Sneasel is the perfect mon for the job there. I really don't have any use for it outside of that, outside of maybe just the utility provided by Knockoff, and Ice Shard priority is also kind of nice. But I will say that after this week I'll be dropping Sneasel for Bronzong, and that's because I ended up picking up Skuntank, which also is a decent Pursuit Trapper. Yeah, I'll talk about that more here in a bit. But the next mon I picked up, beginning my NU selections, is Scyther. Scyther is a Pokemon I've been thinking about drafting for MPL Season 5. I really don't know at this point if that's something I really want to do, but I do know it has some nice potential, as it has Technician, and of course U-Turn is very strong, especially Stab U-Turn, coming off of something like Scyther that has the capacity to hit pretty hard. I believe it can, at least. But yeah, I think it's a decent pickup here as well. Plus it has access to quick attacks, so nice priority. Despite not being Stab, it's still pretty good. It's no Scizor, but it's still a pretty good Pokemon, I think, in my opinion. And even Life Orb or Banded Wing attack from this thing is very strong as well. So excited to see how Scyther does. Plus it has access to Pursuit, so an additional Pursuit Trapper is always nice. And then with my next NU pick, I picked up Skuntank, mainly for defog, as I don't want to force Megalodios to be my defogger every single week. So this takes some pressure off of that. In addition to this being a Pursuit Trapper, like I mentioned before, this kind of takes the role of Sneasel, and also, helps me switch into Ghost types better. So yeah, and then next up is Ursaring. PU picks, I mean, I don't know. I just kind of took the stuff that looked like it could be decent. Ursaring has Guts and Quick Feet as its abilities, both very viable abilities in the formats. Guts can just plow through really any fat team. I don't know if there's any really fat teams in this tournament, but if I'm expecting someone to try to bring a bulkier team, then Ursaring definitely can be a big threat. But the Quick Feet set is also definitely something that teams have to respect, and Ursaring is able to hit very, very hard with the Facade after being poisoned. So definitely a threat to be handled, and that was kind of my goal with my NU picks. I wanted to make sure my opponent had to prepare for them, even if there's stuff that I don't really want to bring that frequently. That's kind of the goal with that. And then last up is Leafeon. Leafeon, obviously my last pick in the draft, so it was, in my opinion, the best thing available that could help my team, in that I'm pretty weak to things like Mold Breaker, Excadrill at this point. And yeah, just any sort of Mold Breaker ground attack just kind of pushes me in. Obviously a defensive Megalodios can take those hits pretty well, but Leafeon has very high natural defense, I believe, and respectable HP stat very high attack stat and a decent speed stat as well. So overall, I think Leafeon's pretty good mon for the job of tanking ground attacks. Plus, it has access to a couple fun attacks like Natural Gift and Wish Passing is a good thing as well. Swords Dance, it has access to Curse, so it can do a lot of cool things. Baton Pass as well. So Leafeon overall, we'll see how it goes. It is a PU mon, so I'm not expecting it to be an MVP by any means, but we'll just kind of see what happens. But yeah, that's kind of my draft, and now we'll go ahead and dive into the team analysis here briefly, and then I'll show you the battle. But my opponent is John in the Arizona Dactyls, like I mentioned before. He has Hoopa Unbound, Skarmory, Goodra, Roserade, Emboar, Seismitoad, Mismagius, Cradily, Meowstic, Male, and Luxray. So I will note that the draft started for this right before Hoopa Unbound got banned from OU. So if the draft had started like a couple days later, Hoopa Unbound would not be on this man's team, but unfortunately it's there, so I have to deal with that broken piece of crap, and we're going to see what I can do. But obviously Hoopa Unbound's a very big threat to my team for that reason alone, but I am pretty lucky in the fact that I do have Skuntank, which it resists both or is immune to its dual stab. So that's really helpful in that its best option to hit me is probably a fighting move and Focus Blast or Drain Punch. So Skuntank definitely is going to be able to allow me to take a couple hits from Hoopa and maneuver around it such that it doesn't just destroy my team immediately. So that's kind of nice. And then I believe the rest of my team should be able to handle it decently well. As long as I can maintain the momentum. So then, other big threats, Roserade is actually a pretty massive threat to my team outside of Mega Latias, as it does have good coverage for everything else, especially if it puts something to sleep with Sleep Powder. I could have a hard time dealing with that, but I can check it, of course. I could check pretty much anything with the team I have, but Roserade is just kind of a nuisance for sure. And then the other big threat I do want to mention is the Emboar, as Emboar hits like a truck. We all know this, especially a Banded set. The good news is, though, that Banded Emboar cannot 2-hit KO a defensive Mega Latias. So that's definitely something that's very important here, and I need to keep Mega Latias healthy in order to handle the Emboar pretty much at all costs, as Emboar is able to do a massive load to anything else on my team. Even Banded Emboar can OHKO a defensive Clefable, which is really nuts. That just proves how strong Banded Emboar is with that reckless ability. So that's about all I have to say on the team analysis. I'll go ahead and briefly show you my team that I built for this game. I'm not going to go into quite as much detail on the teams for this tournament, as obviously my focus is the MPL, but I will give you a brief insight as to what I decided to bring and then show you the battle. So I will be right back. Alright, and here we are with the team briefly. The first mon I decided to bring is the Hoopa Confined, and its primary role here is to be my counter to Roserade, as the only way Roserade is really going to be able to beat this particular set with safety goggles to block the Sleep Powder is if it is like a Hidden Power Technician Hidden Power Ghost or Hidden Power Dark set, as that obviously would push me in with my 4x weakness to Ghost and Dark, but I'm assuming that's not going to be the case if it brings it. They'll probably bring something like Sludge Bomb, Giga Drain coverage with potentially Sleep Powder, and I'm not sure what his hidden power would be if he brought a hidden power. Maybe something more like Substitute or Leech Seed, something like that. Those are all good options against me. I'm not really expecting Technician, HP, Dark, or Ghost, so I figured this was a pretty good check to have for Roserade, really a counter to Roserade at least once or twice switching in. And with all this SPDF investment, Sledge Bomb does nothing, essentially nothing, because I resist it. Giga Drain doesn't do very much at all, and this is the only amount of special attack I really need to be able to OHKO most Roserade sets. And this also is enough to where I can 2-hit KO standard Goodra as well, I believe, or even OHKO it after a Nasty Claw. So this coverage is actually very, very strong against him as well. Shadow Ball Psyshock actually hits everything, but if he's going to bring something specifically to counter the Hoopa, it's going to be Cradily, and Cradily does not want to take a +2 Focus Blast. In fact, it has to be max special defense to have a chance of surviving +2 Focus Blast. So definitely a pretty good mon against his team. I don't think it's going to be sweeping him at all, but it should be able to break through him enough to the point where things like Infernape and Scyther or my Wall Core back here can do some damage. So that's Hoopa. Next up is the Infernape. This set is very strong against him, as well as the combination of Close Combat, Flamethrower, and Grass Knot actually has neutral coverage, if not super effective coverage, against his entire team. He has nothing on his entire roster that can avoid being 2-hit KO'd by Infernape, so this thing is easily a win condition in this game, and I'm able to run really a lot of investment in both attack and special attack, as I only need to hit 341 to outspeed, I believe, the Roserade or the another Mismagius. So yeah, Infernape's very strong in this game. Mach Punch is there to hit perhaps a Scarfed Hoopa in a last ditch effort scenario, or the likely Scarfed Luxray if he were to bring Luxray, as I don't have any electric immunities, so I would expect something like a Scarfed Luxray to come, or even a Banded Luxray or Specs Luxray. It has a lot of options. I expect Luxray to come mainly because I don't have an electric resist. But anyway, Infernape very strong this week, easily at win condition if I can keep it around late game. Next up is Scyther. This is just kind of a momentum mon, as probably the only move I'm ever going to click is U-turn unless I'm trying to sweep late game with Aerial Ace, as U-turn hits his entire team pretty well. His primary switch-ins to this are either an Intimidate Luxray, or if he's predicting the U-turn, he can go Embor, or most likely he'll just go straight to Skarmory on this. And the cool news is everything else on my team is able to hit Skarmory super effectively or for a ton of damage. So as I U-turn on Skarmory, it lets me get a lot of momentum, as he's going to be forced to switch out the Skarmory no matter what. So overall, pretty strong mon this week. I'm not going to be picking up too many Okos, but like I said, its main role is just momentum anyways. So next up is the Clefable. I played with running a Calm Mind set this week, as it really does have a pretty good matchup against this team. However, Stealth Rocks are so important, and the coverage of Moonblast and Flamethrower is so good against his team that I really couldn't afford to run Calm Mind, as Clefable is able to lay rocks very easily against his team, and Moonblast 2-hit KOs Hoopa as long as it's not like Assault Vest, and Flamethrower is obviously there for the Skarmory and the Roserade. So overall, Clef is a pretty good mon in this matchup, and his most likely way to hit me super effectively is on the Poison side instead of the Steel side, so a Kabaya Berry is pretty good here to resist those Poison moves and do a little bit of extra damage to his team. So that's the Clefable. Defensive Wall gives me a nice switch into things like Cradily, Luxray, etc. And really it's just a very good mon against his team in general. So next up is the MVP of this team, and that is Mega Latias. This is the Sub-Roost Dragon Pulse set with Calm Mind that is honestly the whole reason why I think this Pokemon is too good for draft format, as there's so few things that can actually beat this set. And you have to be able to hit hard on the physical side once I get a +1 Calm Mind, and so few things are capable of actually doing that before just getting blown back by something like Dragon Pulse on its own. So something like this is very unlikely to ever have a game without getting 1 kill or more. That's why it's so good in this format, and that's why it should be banned in my opinion, but all OU Pokemon were allowed, so I'm definitely going to be taking advantage of that here. This is my primary switch into Embor, of course, but it's also my primary offensive win condition, or defensive win condition, not really sure how to classify that. It can win the game for me for sure with Calm Mind and Roost, because Dragon Pulse hits his entire team. The only real resistance he has to that is Skarmory, and I'm putting so much pressure on Skarmory elsewhere that I'm not as concerned about that. So yeah, that's the Mega Latias, and finally we have the Skuntank. This is my primary switch into Hoopa, just to buy me some time against it more than anything, as Hoopa's going to be taking Stealth Rock damage, I'm sure, every time it comes in, and if I can hit it with a Crunch or something, that'd be great, or even just Toxic it. And then Flamethrower is essentially only there for the Skarmory, as I'm trying to make sure Skarmory doesn't have any freedom against my team, as I want to make sure it is as weak as possible so that it cannot take enough hits, or so that it cannot hard wall things like Scyther and Mega Latias. So that's the team, and of course Defog there to support the Scyther and just keep rocks off the field in general if they're becoming a nuisance. So yeah, that's the team. I'll go ahead and hop on over to the battle, and we will see what happens in round 1 of this CPC tournament. Alright, and here we are with the team preview, and he did pretty much bring what I would expect here in bringing both Embor and Hoopa Unbound. However, I did also anticipate Roserade coming, just because this matchup really did seem pretty good against my team on paper outside of Mega Latias. So seeing the Meowstic here was kind of surprising to me, as I kind of think it should be the Roserade, but this means that he probably has something kind of cheeky planned with the Meowstic, and unfortunately I don't know much about what Meowstic can do. So when I saw that he actually brought it, I had to pull up the old Bulbapedia on Meowstic to see what the heck he had planned. I knew it had access to things like dual screens, like Prankster dual screens, but outside of that I really didn't know. So that's something I need to keep an eye on in this game. But in terms of the lead matchups, I feel like Scyther's my best lead overall, as if he leads with something like Embor, I can easily just switch into my defensive Latias, take the hit, and if he's Scarfed, I can survive the next one in my Mega Form, and if he's Banded, I can outspeed it and roost off the damage to the point where I can actually wear him down with Recoil with Latias. So, and if he led with like Skarm, I can just U-turn into anything else and immediately threaten it, and I can U-turn on essentially everything on his team without any worries. So Scyther is easily my best lead here, and I really don't care what he decides to lead with. But let's go ahead and jump on into the battle. So he decides to lead off with his Seismitoad. So that's actually perfect, because every little bit of damage I get on this confirms that Infernape can KO it with Grass Knot later on. So I just go straight into my Clefable, as it seems pretty safe, and he just goes for the knockoff. I lose my Kabaya Berry, which kind of sucks, but it's not that big of a deal. The most important thing here, though, is that I noticed that the Seismitoad does not have leftovers, so most likely it is a Rendo Berry set, so I need to keep that in mind and don't let my Infernape get lured by that. So here he goes into a Scarm, and I actually get a burn with Flamethrower, which is something that I don't think I've ever done before in my life. So that's pretty exciting news, and I'm able to have a better time wearing it down with my Clefable now, as I beat this 1v1, as I'm bound to get a crit eventually, and once I do get the crit, he might go down to the burn damage. So Clefable definitely wins this 1v1 at this point, and he's going to be forced to do either Roost repeatedly or switch into something and take a bunch of damage from Clefable. So he's in kind of a pickle at this point, and now I'm just going to keep firing off Flamethrowers, pressuring him a little bit, and just making sure I get a safe switch into my Infernape, which I'll do here pretty soon, as once I get Infernape in against the Scarm, it's essentially a free kill, as he has nothing that can take a combination of Flamethrower in close combat, or 2 Flamethrowers if he were to go into Meowsticks. So Infernape definitely is a good play here very soon, and I do decide to make the play here, as he's going to go for the Roost, and he's going to be forced to essentially pick his fodder, and he decides to sack his Skarmory here, which actually is a play I extremely disagree with, as Skarmory, as it clearly was a Spadef variant to take that little damage from Clefable's Flamethrower, probably was his best answer to Mega Latias, and he definitely could have found himself in quite the pickle if I were able to get up a couple Calm Minds with Mega Latias, as he would have absolutely nothing left to beat it from behind a substitute. Now here I just go into my Clefable on the Seismitoad, as it's a pretty safe switch in, as I did end up switching. I'm going to pause briefly to explain a play I did earlier. I did switch out on turn 10 as he goes for Protect, as there's really no other reason for him to go into Seismitoad unless he had a Rendo Berry, as there's no reason why I wouldn't bring Grass Knot in this matchup. So I figured it was a pretty obvious lure on his end, and I decided to just swap out the Infernape into my Clefable to preserve Infernape, as Infernape is very, very good against the rest of his team still. So, resuming, Clefable beats this Seismitoad easily 1v1, and he does get up his rocks during this process, but I'm able to wear it down to 9% with the Clefable, and now I'm going to take this as an opportunity to get Clefable back up to essentially full health, and predicting the, I guess not yet, so he goes for another Earthquake, as I just go for a Soft Boil to get up to maximum health, and now expecting the Earthquake, I'm just going to go into my Latias and try to set up and actually go for a 6-0 sweep here if I can get it, as I feel like the Earthquake is pretty likely, and Knockoff will not be able to break my substitute for sure. So I'm going to just go for the sub here as he goes for the knockoff, and it does not break the sub, doesn't even get close, I'm sure. Probably does like 10 to 15%. I'm just going to go straight for the Calm Mind, as it seems pretty free as it goes for the second knockoff. There I probably should have just gone for the Roost actually, but it's no big deal, as he goes into his Hoopa, and I go for another substitute. Now here, let me pause. Apparently, for whatever reason I didn't know this, Hyperspace Fury can go through substitutes. It just bypasses them, and for whatever reason I had never encountered that situation, probably because I only used like one team on the OU ladder, so I had never seen this happen before. And unfortunately that bites me in the butt right here, as I go for Dragon Pulse. It's obviously an Assault Vest set, and he just takes me out with a Hyperspace Fury. So Hyperspace Fury does not only go through Protect, it also goes through Substitute. Noted. So now I have quite the issue to deal with, as I lost my counter to Imbor. And now Imbor has become a massive, massive threat to my team, and I'm kind of scrambling to think, how am I going to beat this Imbor? How am I going to be able to prevent getting swept by this Imbor? And we'll just kind of see what happens, but I have to keep certain things as healthy as possible to be able to have a chance here. And if it's a Scarfed Imbor, though, I essentially just lose this game if I let Clef get weakened any further. So Clefable becomes very, very important here. But I do just go into my Skuntank on the Hoopa, as he probably has nothing to hit me very hard. Turns out his best option is Drain Punch, which is fine, as I do have a Toxic on it. Kind of expecting him to try to switch into his Imbor, as I know that I need to get damage on this Imbor desperately to be able to make sure I win this game. But he makes a good play here in sacking off his Seismitoad. And yeah, so Seismitoad goes down to the Crunch, and he'll go into his Luxray here. Now this also is a pretty big play in the game, as running the calc, he has to be a banded Luxray to have, okay, if he is a Scarfed Luxray or a non-banded, non-attack boosted Luxray, he has a very, very small chance of taking me out from this range with a Bolt Strike, I believe is what it's called. Probably not Volt Strike, it's Wild Charge, there we go. He has a very small chance of being able to take me out with Wild Charge from this range. It's like a 2% chance, I believe, something like that. And as you can see, he gets it. Now, this told me that he probably is a Banded Luxray. His Banded Luxray still outspeeds my Skunk, and it just seemed pretty likely to me that he'd be a Banded Luxray to maybe be able to hit Clefable harder. And because he was able to take out my Skuntank here, and because I need to keep Clefable at as high of health as possible, I go into my Infernape under the assumption that he's probably Banded. And it turns out that he's Scarfed and got a essentially max roll against my Skuntank. And I therefore lose my Infernape also to the Luxray. Now this is also kind of bad because now my back is kind of against the wall, even further against the Imbor, as I don't have my priority anymore. I don't know what priority Mach Punch that is. So now he goes into his cat, his Meowstick, and my Dedicate switch in is the Clefable, as there's no way this can be a threat to my Clefable at all. Here's where I kind of wish I did have Calm Mind this week, but in the long run I know it wasn't or in hindsight, I know it still wasn't the best idea. As rocks were very, very valuable this game. But regardless, he starts setting up his screens and paralyzes the Clefable. So this is just easily going to be a huge nuisance to my winning this game. And here he sacks off his Hoopa, which was a good play. Yeah, it was a good play, I think, on his end. And now he goes into Imbor. So here, if he's Scarfed, he has no chance of taking me out with Flare Blitz. If he's Banded, he takes me out 100%. And my best play is still to stay in, as this is the only thing I had to take a hit from this, potentially. And if I can maybe survive a Scarfed Flare Blitz or a non-Banded Flare Blitz with this and soft load off the damage, I can weaken him through his own recoil to the point where he will be in range of a quick attack from Scyther. That's kind of the game plan. If he's Scarfed, if he's Banded, I go down, and then I can do some fun stuff with Scyther or Hoopa. So we'll just see what happens. He takes me out, so he's definitely Banded. And down goes my Clefable, so now I have the option of either going to Hoopa or to Scyther. I think the end game comes down to essentially the same thing regardless of which Pokemon to send out here. So I decided to go with Scyther, thinking that Aerial Ace would do more damage than 35% to this cat. So Scyther's actually kind of weak, and I figured that one out mid-battle, which is kind of unfortunate, but you have to make mistakes to learn, and Scyther's probably not the strongest Pokemon for draft format. But regardless, I'm able to do 35% to the cat originally, and then he goes for Thunder Wave, gets the first turn paralysis, which is actually really bad. And here it comes down to this turn 34, where if he started going for Psychics, he would take me out with 2 Psychics, and if I were to get like Parahaxed or something, and he was able to 1v1 my Scyther with this cat, then I probably would lose the game, as he'd be able to Prankster T-Wave my Hoopa, and then I would lose to Imbor. So I have to hope that I don't get Parahax out of the game here, as I just go for the Aerial Ace. He survives barely, and now it comes down to this one turn. If I can survive the Psychic and not get paralyzed, I think I win with Hoopa, and I do not get paralyzed. I'm able to come out with a KO on the cat. And now Banded Imbor comes in. His best play is probably to go for Sucker Punch here. He actually goes for Flare Blitz, which actually could have been a choke if I were not a Nasty Plot Hoopa. But if he had locked himself into Sucker Punch, I still could just spam Nasty Plot with this until he ran out of Sucker Punches, and then taking him out with a Psyshock, as that will kill regardless at this range, even behind the Reflect. So that's the game. It was actually very, very close. I do think it would have not been quite as close if I was aware of the fact that Hyperspace Fury goes through Substitute, as then I have zero reason to bring a Substitute Megalodios this week. I would have brought something that had something to hit Hoopa a lot harder, like maybe even Hidden Power Bug. I probably could have done that, and it would have worked out pretty well in my opinion. So regardless, that's the game. We do manage to advance to round 2 of this tournament, where we will face the winner of, let me check on that real quick. We'll face the winner of SCW and WSR. So that's the winner of WSR, the Wisconsin Rhydons and the Super Clawitzers. So both players I'm not terribly familiar with, so that'll be pretty exciting. But yeah, that's the game. I hope you enjoyed seeing a little bit of draft content that's not from the MPL, and we'll see how far I can go in this tournament. But thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you all next week. Peace.